Welcome to Lesson 4 on Interactions and Interdependence. Starting with SC13, draw a predator-prey graph. Okay guys, so before we go on to do a graph, we're going to have a little look at a simulation of one and just have a little discussion about predator-prey relationships, which we touched on last lesson. So in this picture here, we have a wolf who is obviously the predator, and then we have a, is it an elk? An elk or a moose, which is our prey. So obviously quite a large prey in this case, but prey nonetheless. And what we're going to think about is how the population of the wolf affects the population of the moose. So let's have a look at that in graph form. So you can see that as the population of the moose rises, so it's a steep rise there, it's rising because if we look at the wolf population in blue, the wolf population is really low. So that allows the moose population, so if you can see, it's just here, the key, so red for moose and blue for wolf. So you can see that if the predator population is low, it allows the prey to survive and to reproduce, and their babies to survive, and so we get this spike in their population. If I then press play and carry it on, so this time span, by the way, is over generations. So it's quite a long time span. So if I press play and we'll look at the next step. So you can see that it will reach a kind of optimum number, and it can't exceed that. And there's other limiting factors that are going to stop it exceeding that. Things like availability of food, things like shelter and space, things like finding a mate and so on. But one of the biggest factors is that if you have a nice high number of prey, that's going to allow your predator population to increase. Now the predator population doesn't increase to as high a level as the prey population. You always have more prey than you do predators, but it is increasing nonetheless, and you can see that it causes a sharp drop in the prey population. So because there's more predators, more of the prey are getting eaten, and therefore their population is dropping down, and actually it is going below the wolf population, which is quite unusual actually. But let's look at what happens next. So because there weren't enough prey for them to catch and eat, the predator population is going to drop as well. So just after the prey population drops, the predator population will drop because they won't have enough food. Now, as their population drops, that means that the prey population can recover because they're not being eaten as much. So up they go. And I'm sure you can predict what's going to happen next. So we get this constant flow kind of up and down of the populations, and you can see that the pattern is that the spike of prey is always just before the spike of predators, and that's because the predators are relying on the prey for food. So you get this spike in prey, and then straight after you get this spike in predator. Okay, I hope that makes sense. It's quite long, but now we'll look at drawing your own version of a graph like this, a predator-prey graph. If you're really confident with graphs and you want to just pause the video here and draw the whole graph yourself, that's fine. But if you're not very confident with graphs, I suggest that you watch the video that's coming up where I'm going to go through step by step how to draw it. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to draw the graph in this session. So you have your table up here, and in your table you have got 3 sets of numbers. Often in a table you only have 2 sets of numbers. So we're going to look at what you do when there's 3 sets rather than 2. And you need to make sure that you have read these instructions thoroughly. So first step is to draw the axes and add suitable scales. So let's do that first step now. Now, of course, when you're drawing a graph, you need to use a ruler and you need to use a sharp pencil. However, because I want you to be able to see it nice and clearly, I'm actually going to use a coloured erasable pen, but you must use pencil. So draw axes and add a suitable scale. So if we look at this paper, we don't want to start right over here because that's not the darker line. If you look, there's a darker, thicker line, and that's where we want to start. So actually, I think pencil might show up better just on this bit anyway. Oops. Dougie, can you stop wandering around, please? You're very noisy. Right, okay, so there is my first axes, and then the darker line at the bottom of the paper so I'm pressing probably harder than you need to, but it's because I want you to be able to see it really well. So those are my 2 axes. So I've done the first part of that instruction, draw the axes and but I need to add suitable scales. So this is the point where I need to think about what's going on the bottom and what's going along the side of my graph. So I always like to think about which is my input or independent variable. So my independent variable is the time in months. And that's because if you think about it, you're not in control of the population size. You can't control that. What you are in control of is when you measure the population size. All right. So these people decided to measure it every 2 months, the population size. The other way to look for the independent variable is it's usually the thing that's going up in a nice times table already, and that's because it's not a set of results, it's a predetermined, pre-decided set of numbers. So the row or column that's already in a nice times table will usually be your independent variable. Okay, so your independent variable always goes on the x-axis, okay? So the next thing that I would recommend, sorry I keep hitting the camera here guys, it's like suspended above what I'm doing. So the next step is you need to draw your little lines on each of the darker lines. So it's every 5 squares that you're drawing a little line. And that is a really important step that people seem to always forget. Then you want to think about, right, if this is 0 and I need to get up to 16, what times table is going to work for me? So let's try 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Great. So 2 times table is going to work perfectly. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. And then it's good practice to just carry on to the end. So I can go up to 20. All right, so that gives me my x-axis. So now I need to think about my y-axis, and I'm going to draw on my little lines once again. Dougie, please stop wandering around, you're so noisy. Sorry about the little paw sounds in the background. Right, now this here is for the dependent variable, and the dependent variable is the population size. Now, we've got 2 sets of results, but don't worry about that for now. Just worry about what is your highest number that you have to plot at any point. So if I look along here and here, my highest number that it gets to is 510. Okay, so I now need to work out a times table where I can start at 0 and I need to end at a number over 500. So maybe 550 might make sense. So let's try the 50 times table in that case. 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350, 400. So that's not taking me high enough. So the next sensible times table after the 50 times table to try out would be the 100 times table. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. Perfect. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and again, although we could stop at 600 because we don't have any numbers higher than that, it's a good idea to just finish off your graph like that. Okay, and that is my 2 axes done. So I've drawn the axes and I've added suitable scales. So I would get a mark for having done each of those things, each of those scales properly. Now my next instruction is to label both axes. So this axis here, I go up to here and I see my label from here and I simply write the exact same thing that's in the table. I write it down here. So time in months. It's really important that you put the units in because otherwise this could be years, it could be decades, we have no idea. It could be days if it were bacteria, or hours even if it was bacteria. Okay, and then we need the other label from the table up the side. So the other label is population size. My pencil is the exact right length to keep hitting the tripod of my phones. That's why it's wobbling everywhere. Sorry, guys. I'm having lefty problems. Population. If I was right-handed, this wouldn't happen. Population size. There we go, population size. And that doesn't have a unit for it, so we just need to write that. And that is our second stage completed. And if you've labelled both the axes, you can have both the marks. Now, this is where we have to start thinking about the fact that we've got 2 rows of results. So it says plot the predator results and label the line foxes. Okie dokie. So foxes is the bottom one, and at 0 months the population size was exactly 100. So at 0 months it was 100, and I draw a nice small neat cross like that. Okay, then I go on to the next 2 months ahead, and at 2 months it was 140. So 2 months, 140. Now, if this is 100, that means that's 120, 140, 160, 180. So each is worth 20. So I need to go 2 boxes over the 100. That would be 140, and draw my cross there. Okay. If you're struggling to work out where a number is exactly, just sort of mark it on the scale at the side. All right. Now, I'd recommend probably pausing the video here and doing the rest of the plotting yourself, and then I'll see you back in a minute once we've plotted all of that line, okay? Don't draw a line of best fit or anything, just do the crosses, okay, guys? Okay, so you should then have something that looks like this. Now, we often in science do a line of best fit, don't we? And what you often do in maths is you will join each point with a ruler. Now, in this particular graph, you do want to hit all of the points, but you don't want to be using a ruler. You want it to be a smooth curve. I'm going to have to turn this sideways because I can't, again, because I'm lefty, I draw at a funny angle, I'm afraid, boys. So hopefully this will still translate as making sense. But what you want to do is start, obviously, at your first cross and then draw a smooth curve that connects each point like that. Okay, so you should then finish up with a line that looks like this, and then they asked us to label it as foxes, so you can do that in pen or pencil, it doesn't matter, but you're going to label the line over here so that it's not in the way. You don't want to put it like in the graph, so you label it over at the end, so foxes like that. Okay, right, and that is us done with our third point. I will correct this for you, or mark this bit for you, because I'm going to get you to submit on Showbie your finished graph. So I'll let you know if you got all 4 marks for accuracy of plotting. It will depend whether you're accurate or not. Okay, so we're on to our last thing then, which is to plot the prey results and label the line rabbits. So we now have to do this row here, the one labelled rabbits, and they start at 300. So 0 and 300. And then they go up to 510. And then they go down to 305. So make sure you're thinking carefully about where your cross goes. And again, if you pause the video and do the rest of the plotting on your own, and now that you know how to do the line, you should be able to do the line on your own as well.
Okay, so here are my points, and I'm just going to show you me drawing in the line. So again, I'm trying to create a nice, smooth curve. Like that. And this time I have to label this one as rats.
And there is my completed graph. So hopefully yours looks something like this as well, and you can tick off your last point, which is to plot the prey results. Okay, so you need to upload your graph to Showbie, and you need to make sure you upload it in the right place in the assignment called Predator Prey Graph, please. Okay, moving on to the Rate My Graph section. Okay, so as I said, I am going to have a look at your graph as well, but I would like you to do this activity where you rate your graph, because what it does is it really helps you to make sure that you've really understood what it takes to draw a good graph. So there are 3 things that are important. There's the presentation, there's the accuracy, and then there's the labelling. And actually presentation really is part of the accuracy. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at your graph, and for each of these questions you're just going to tick here to show whether you did it or not. So for example, have you used a ruler? Well, yes, I did use a ruler for my axes, so I would do a tick there. Have you used a sharp pencil? I actually don't think I did use that sharp of a pencil, so I'm going to give myself a cross there. And have you drawn neatly? Yes, I have drawn neatly. So I would get a 2 out of 3 here, and next time I really should sharpen my pencil more. However, I did that on purpose because it showed up better being a bit blunter. But I'm sure you guys sharpened your pencils. Okay, so if you pause and then carry on assessing your graph, and then you'll get yourself a score for your graph. Moving on to SC14. Okay, on to SC14, which is interpreting complex predator-prey graphs. So when we draw a graph as a scientist, or usually they're actually computer simulated nowadays, but when ecologists or zoologists make graphs of populations, they don't make a graph and then not use it, ignore it. The point of making a graph is because it tells you information. And so you have to sit and analyze it and interpret it to work out, well, what's this telling me about the rabbits? What's this telling me about the foxes? What's this telling me about their relationship? So we're going to try answering those questions now. All right, so A says, estimate the size of the prey population after 11 months. Now, I would probably highlight the key words because this is the kind of question, it's really easy to make silly mistakes and say do the predators instead of the prey. So I'm looking for the prey and I'm looking for the answer at 11 months. So the way you estimate is as follows. So here is 11, so I'm going to mark it on nice and clearly. And then it's really important that you do this. You draw a dotted line up to the prey, which are the rabbits, like that. And then where your dotted line hits the data line, you then go across again with a dotted line. And markers of exams will look to see if you've done this dotted line, and they don't give you the mark always. If you haven't done it, they might not give you the mark, even if you get the right answer, which I know seems a bit mean. Okay, so it's hitting at 4:20. So again, I'm going to note it on here to make sure, just to really make sure I don't make any silly mistakes. So then in my answer, I can write in that it was 420. And then usually here you'd need a unit, like say centimeters or seconds or whatever it was, but because this is population size, this is a literal number. It's literally, there were 420 of them, so you don't need a unit. So if you now pause the video and have a go at estimating this one, make sure to highlight the key information, make sure that you draw the dotted line on, okay? Right, so you should have highlighted predator, you should have highlighted 5 months, and then you should have gone onto your graph along to 5 up to here, across to here. And it should be, so this is halfway between one of the boxes, so 20, 40, 60. So that would be 80, so that must be 70, so 170. So 170. So those are your two estimated answers. Now, if you got the numbers slightly off, that will just be a difference in your line is slightly different than mine that you've drawn. If it's very off, then you've obviously done something wrong. So I'll allow an error point of 10 either side. So if you put 410 or 430, that's fine. If you put 180 or 160, I'll allow that, that's fine, okay? All right, so moving on. Very often with graphs, you'll be asked to describe what happens to one of the lines, or if there's only one line, what happens to that line. So the line they're asking about is the predator population, and they've specifically asked between 6 and 10 months, okay? Now, people very often want to explain instead of describe, so they're trying to say why something is happening. If you've been asked to describe, you mustn't talk about why anything is happening. You are being really literal about what's happening to that line. Is it going up? Is it going down? Has it plateaued? So it's nothing to do with why, and it's all to do with describing what. Okay, so let's have a look at the graph and let's find where they've asked us. So they said predator between 6 and 10 months. So they're asking, and again, draw on the graph. It's your graph, so you can draw on it. So here is the predator line, and here is 6 months, and here is 10 months. So you can see between 6 and 8, it's going down, but then between 8 and 10, it's going up. And if you look at the question, it's worth 2 marks. So what that tells us is that they want 2 comments. So I'm going to use bullet points, just how I've taught you, and I'm going to split this section I've been asked about into 2 sections. So this is the first section I'm going to talk about, and this is the second section that I'm going to talk about. Now, when you're talking about a graph, refer to the data. And what I mean by that is use the numbers that you need to use, that you have been given. So I'm going to say between 6 and 8 months. So between 6 and 8 months, what's happening to my line? Well, it's going down. Is it going down rapidly or slowly? It's going down pretty slowly. It's not like this line here. So I'm going to say between 6 and 8 months, and they've said predator population, so I'm going to say predator population. If they'd said line, I would use the word line. So try and use the language from the question. So the predator population decreased slowly. So I've said that it's going down. I said that that's happening slowly. I've said when exactly that's happening. So it's a really, really clear, succinct sentence that tells them everything that they need to know. So there's no need to make it, a fancy answer. Just keep it simple, keep it scientific. All right, so your next bullet point, see if you can now use this same structure to write the next bullet point. So pause the video and see what you can come up with. Okay, so what I would have written is between, so just start in the same way, between, and this time it's 8 and 10 months. The predator population, so I'm literally just changing the numbers here. But this time it is slowly increasing. So I'm going to put increased slowly. And there we go, really simple. Okay, so going on to the next one, what happens to the prey population just after the predator population hits its lowest point? This time they've asked you why. So that tells you that your first bullet point is going to be describing what happens to the prey population, and your second bullet point is going to be the explaining why that happens, okay? So this time I'm not going to give you the answer first. I'd like you to pause and have a go at it on your own, and then I'll go through the answer afterwards. Okay, so what you should have done is look for what happens when the prey population, when the predator population reaches its lowest point. So the lowest points are here, here, and here. So that's the kind of bottom of the wave, as it were. So if you look at what's happening to the prey population after that point, it's peaking, isn't it? So you can see it's, if we go straight up from here, it's continuing to rise and it's reaching its peak. Same here. It's, oh, actually it's easier to see over here. Same here. So it's continuing to rise. It's reaching its absolute peak. Okay, so I'm going to say the prey population reaches its peak. Now, you could have said anything along the lines of it's increasing rapidly, it's reached its highest point, anything that is saying the same point, but you can use different language, all right? So it's reaching its highest numbers, it's reaching its peak. Now, why is that? Well, we looked at this at the beginning of the lesson. So the less predators there are, the less prey are going to get eaten. Simple as that. So let's put it like that. The less predators, oops, this is why we use erasable pens. The less predators there are, the less prey will get eaten. Now, I think that that's enough information actually, but it's always best if you've got more room to just make sure you really hit your answer home. So therefore, if you use a therefore, it really sort of concludes what you're saying. So therefore, there will be more prey. So the first mark's really for saying that the prey population is rising, is reaching its peak. The second mark is for saying that if there's less predators, then less prey will get eaten, or you could say more prey will survive. It means the same thing, okay? All right, on to the last question. Extrapolate your predator line to estimate the size of the predator population after 18 months. Okay, so again, highlight the keywords. And then we haven't done extrapolation before, so I'm going to show you how to do it on the rabbit line, and then you can do it on the fox's line. Okay, so what extrapolate means is it means after the point where you don't have any results, because you've seen a pattern, you should be able to carry on and show where it would go. So we know that the rabbit population just keeps going up at this point, up to around the 500 mark. And that it then starts going back down again. So I would extrapolate it something like that, because that mountain looks like, well, that mountain looks like that mountain. So you're now going to pause the video and see if you can do this for the foxes and write your answer into here, okay? So what you should have done is you should have looked at the peaks before, so they're always around the 200 mark. So I'm going to continue my peak on to the 200 mark and then start going down. Now they've asked for what we think the population size would be at 18. So I'm going to draw my dotted line up, and then I'm going to draw my dotted line across. Don't forget your dotted line. Very important, guys. And mine has come up at, I'd say 145. If I look over here. So 20, 40. It's not quite at the 50 mark. So 145 is what I'm going to put. And then I'm going to write 145. And I'm going to put foxes. So I'm going to allow you a difference of 15 on each side. So if you put 100 and, oh no, that's too much. Sorry, I'm going to allow you a difference of 5 on each side. So if you put 140, that's fine. If you put 150, that's fine. So that is us done with SC14. Okay, so I wanted to take this point in the topic, because it's quite a short topic, to just do some exam questions and check how we're doing with the knowledge part of this and applying it to exam questions. So there are 2 exam questions, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the mark schemes on Showbie for these, okay? So what I would like you to do is to do question 1 and then mark it, and then once you've marked it, do question 2 and mark that one, okay? They are fairly simple questions, so hopefully you should be able to mark them fairly easily. But if you have any problems, remember I'm always there on Showbie to help you. Okay, so remember that you can find the mark scheme on Showbie to mark question 1. Once again, remember to look for the mark scheme on Showbie. Congratulations, you've completed lesson 4.